Well, hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome Linda Trott Dickman here in this video recording. Linda is a mover and shaker in the poetry and especially the poetry of hunger community. And I'm just so delighted to be able to visit with her for a few minutes today to check with her about all of the insights that she has and is willing to share with us about the power of poetry to speak back to hunger. Let me introduce Linda. She's got a wonderful resume. Linda Trott Dickman is an award-winning poet. In fact, she just recently learned that she's won yet another award. She's the author of 4 chapbooks of poetry and a poetry prompt book for children of all ages. Her work has been anthologized locally and internationally. She's the coordinator of poetry for the Northport Arts Coalition in New York State in the USA. Linda works with poets of all ages. She works with the Walt Whitman Birthplace Association, with local museums, and she leads a poetry workshop at Samantha's Little Bit of Heaven coffee shop. Most importantly, she makes a mean linguine and clam sauce recipe that is as old as she is. In other words, about 25 years old. She loves singing in her choir, church choir, and she's a punster. Welcome so much, Linda, to the discussion. Did you have any opening thoughts that you'd like to share with us before we kind of dive into a couple of questions?
Just that any time spent with you, Hiram, is always a good thing. I enjoy your company. I look forward to meeting you in person. I feel like we've known each other for years already, and it maybe we have, but not as many years as it feels like. So opening thoughts, I just am happy to be here and happy to give you any insights I can that will help the cause.
Wonderful. You bring humor and energy and all sorts of delightful insights into the Poetry X Hunger community, and we're really grateful. So you've had experience over the years in helping young people on their learning journey, I think primarily as a librarian at schools. And I'm just kind of curious, based on that experience, what do you think the role of poetry is in the learning process for young people?
Well, as Lee Bennett Hopkins, who has been a mentor for me during my college years and in recent years, said there should never be a day without poetry. Poetry is a concise way of getting important, punny, funny, heartfelt, sad, any emotion you can have, there is a poem to go with it. It works for reluctant readers, of which I was one and can still be, depending on what I'm looking at. It is something for the clever. It is something for the funny. It is something for the serious. It's got something for everyone.
And I think
so those are my opening thoughts.
Yeah, I think it does help with the learning process in that young people are often anxious to better express themselves. And as you say, poetry is kind of a nuggetized way of, I guess you'd say, training them to be thinking very carefully about how to express themselves. About the role of poetry as it speaks back to hunger in the anti-hunger cause. You've contributed poems to the Poetry X Hunger website. What's your feeling about how poetry can be useful to the anti-hunger cause?
I have several thoughts on the matter. But the one that comes to mind first is that it gives a voice to something that many people in my circle have no experience with. It gives a voice to those people who have stood there hungrily eyeing something. Everything from, I'm thinking of the film Pretty Woman, where one of the girls goes by every day and picks up cherries and fruit and olives from the local bar because she's not eating enough. to a friend of mine who has stolen food to keep he and his brother alive when his mother was unable to be a good mom. So poetry gives a chance to those kids to have a voice.
Mm. Well, I often am challenged by the notion that if you haven't been hungry, you really can't write a poem about hunger. What are your thoughts on that, Linda?
I can only speak for me.
Sure.
When I'm hungry, I now am much more aware of what that feels like. And I think you can write about it. I'm thinking of an old TV show, can't think of the name of it, but a father and his son were walking, and the son was hungry, and the father had a sandwich, and he says, "Here's half, honey. I'll eat the other half." But when they were still out overnight, over several nights, he gave his son the half. That wasn't hard to understand. Don't have to be hungry to write hunger poetry. You have to be aware of hunger and the way it affects people.
Right. Yeah. One of the ways I think about it, I mean, certainly if somebody has been hungry and then been able to escape that situation and think back and write about it, those are words that are incredibly authentic, and we want to respect and honor that kind of work. But for those of us who have been incredibly fortunate enough never to have really experienced hunger, I still think there's a place for all of us to be able to write about it in ways that kind of look at it from the point of view of somebody who's never been hungry. I've never been hungry. Why are you hungry? And that kind of question, I think, can be raised in a poem and explored in a poem. Or what is it about the system, so to speak, our world, that allows you to be hungry when, my friends and I, none of us are hungry. So I think there is a spot for that. Any kind of advice that you might have for anyone who wants to write a poem about hunger, getting started? I noticed that you've written a book for prompting children to write poetry generally. Any kind of thoughts about how to prompt somebody who's interested in writing about hunger?
In contemplating this interview, I went into teacher mode, and instantly I thought of my experience in education, where in every building there was a pantry box for food donations, and there was a list of things that were asked for.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the most poignant stories is when I found out that the kids that were using the food pantry were bringing food in to donate to the food pantry.
Wow.
And that just broke my heart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing. But I was thinking about a field trip. Kids take lots of field trips. At least they do now. They're starting to come back. And a food pantry is not a bad place to take a field trip. A food pantry, so that as a poet, you're looking for sight, sound, smells, all the senses.
Sure.
So that's another way.
Yeah, we've recently, well, now it's been about 3 or 4 years, worked with some of the food banks not too far from me in the Washington, D.C. area. And we've identified poets to be poets in residence at those food banks. And in one case, for as long as a year. And so what's happened then is that the poets have visited the food bank and written their impressions about what they felt, what they learned, what they heard, and the like. And then those poems have been used by the food banks in their campaigns, in their messaging, and the like. So yeah, I think there are opportunities there.
I think one of the most important things that we had as educators was an entreaty to we were entreated to make it practical. And for me, that's how lessons came home. So we did, for instance, snack bags for dogs at a shelter. And the kids wrote poems on the bags, inviting people to adopt them.
Cool.
And so they were literally doggy and kitty bags. And we took them to the local shelter, and those things were used. So it was practical application of poetry.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to spring something on you here that I really hadn't planned, but I'm going to call up a poem that you have posted on the Poetry X Hunger website and see if you'd be willing to read it for us here today. Let me see if I can find it. I think I can. Let me see. Is this it? Let's see. Nope, that's not it. Never mind. Let me try one other place. Oh, I think I just saw it. Let me try it one more time here.
Yeah, there's more than one, but
yeah, there's more than one, and you could choose. Here's one by Linda Trott Dickman for the students for 60,000 on their first trip to Nicaragua. Would that be one that you would care to read for us?
Sure.
Okay, great. And I can scroll down through it as you're reading it.
Okay. For the students for 60,000 on their first trip to Nicaragua, for Pete White and all those students. They got off the plane stuffed with good intentions, ready to change lives, make bricks, build houses, teach lessons, feed the hungry. The trash from the last of their snacks disposed of responsibly. Next stop was after the bumpy, unpredictable ride. The expectations of primitive conditions, unfamiliar places to relieve their bodies, rest their heads, unfamiliar cooks, bellies used to plenty, met by very excited children. One weary traveler remembered that there was more snack in her bag. She pulled out 2 oranges, the ones she had been saving for herself. Such a sad offering for the small group. Before she could make a decision, one spirited boy grabbed one. She watched open-mouthed as he painstakingly peeled back the covering, carefully dividing this juicy treasure among 10. She wasn't hungry after that.
What I call a kind of a powerful snapshot of an experience that it sounds like the poet, I'm assuming, perhaps you had, and the arrival of a class of young people into a village perhaps that was experiencing hunger, and the very poignant scene that you depict there almost in a photographic sort of way of what happened as the hungry met those who are well fed. So thank you for writing that poem and for sharing it on Poetry X Hunger. Well, Linda, as we come to a close, first off, I want to thank you again for sharing your energies and your insights here with us today. I also wanted to just give you the last chance to share any final thoughts with us before we sign off.
Knowing how you like focus, I thought that as a librarian, what I would encourage people to do would be to go to the children's section of their local library, get out poetry anthologies, don't take one out until you find what you need, and look for poems that have to do with food or hunger. And consider writing a poem, or go to look at biographies. What comes to mind are after disasters, what people do for food. I'm sure Maui is going through it now.
Yeah.
And I know that the one that always gets me is World War II. Both sides of the fence, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, wonderful idea for a kind of a prompt to get things going, and the pencils working and the keyboards tapping on this front. Again, Linda Trott Dickman, a poet, a friend, and a real contributor to the Poetry X Hunger community. Thank you so much, Linda, for being here, and best wishes. And hey, congratulations on that most recent wonderful poetry award.
Thank you so much, Hiram.
Take care.
You too.